Hello and welcome to the Smooth Scaling podcast, where we are speaking with industry experts to uncover how to design, build, and run scalable and resilient systems. I'm your host, José Quaresma, and today I'm joined by Jillian Als, CMO at Qt. This was a special episode for a variety of reasons. First, it was great to sit down with Jill and get to pick her brilliant brain. On the other side, it was also great to discuss these findings from a recent report that we have done at Qt. It's called The Age of Online Trust. It was a survey with over 1,000 global consumers, and it was fascinating to talk about the importance of building and maintaining online trust and how the technical work behind designing resilient and scalable systems is foundational in delivering great customer experiences. Enjoy! Welcome, Jill. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I've been very eager to join, so thanks for having me.
That's good. It has been a long time coming, so it's very happy to have you on. And we have some time to talk about this really nice report that we have. But maybe before we get into that, could we talk a little bit about reliability, about because it's a lot of what we talk in the podcast about scaling, about reliability. And we often look at it and discuss it from a technology infrastructure perspective. I think you also have that perspective, but you also have kind of more the commercial kind of customers' view on it. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. I mean, well, specifically at Qt, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but certainly reliability is our license to operate in the market. So as a member of the leadership team, I know that quite well. If I put on just my commercial hat, so to speak, I think the same is true, right? I need, as a marketer, a website that is always up and running, and I invest a lot of, the company would say I invest a lot of money on doing things for the brand, for the company to drive growth. And I have like a expectation that if I'm sending traffic to the website, if I'm doing campaigns, all of these things, that reliability is an assumed truth, so to speak. And I think that's like an unspoken contract between myself and the technical side of the organization, and maybe more important to address it head on sometimes. B2B kind of marketing might not be as peak centric, so to speak. But of course, there are days where things aren't working as they're supposed to be, and it's all hands on deck kind of thing when that happens. And it's something that's, again, something I assume to be a truth, but something that when it's broken is a big issue. If the site is down or is buggy or something, it's everyone drops everything and goes all in on it, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And so that's more, I guess, the internal kind of your perspective and the teams on it, but as kind of in Qt, also spoken with our customers, but both commercial side and technical side customers. So do you see them, maybe it's not easy to define, but do you see them looking at reliability in a fundamentally different way, or kind of?
I think they both need it and know that they need it, right? Mm-hmm. And how to solve for it if it's uncertain might be different, right? So from the technical side, they might have very specific ideas of, well, we can scale this, but we can't scale that, or this is going to cost too much. Where myself personally, of course, having worked at Qt, I have a different perspective, but maybe the more traditional commercial side of the business would be like, just make it work, right? Mm-hmm. I don't care what it costs. I should, of course, care what it costs, but the arrogance that could be there is just, I just assume that you can make this work. And coming to a conversation about, okay, but how do we solve for this in a way, I think then the conversation shifts. And at Qt, we do speak with the commercial side of the organization because we touch the end user experience. Yeah. And then everything that's ingrained in you in marketing, at least, is speed is king, right? You need to be able to act in milliseconds. It affects your conversion rate, et cetera. And we have lots of data that we'll get into that kind of backs up that there are important ways of looking at it, that speed is one thing, but, the experience is king, actually. It's not the speed itself. And some people are willing to wait if it means that their experience will be better.
So you're already getting a little bit into the our report, right? And this is the name, the age of online trust.
Yeah.
Can you tell us like how that it was kind of you commissioned it, right? We were. Can you tell us maybe starting by kind of how it came to be?
Sure.
That we should do,
Get up in the helicopter, so to speak. So at Kiewit, 15 years old, we were born out of an idea, and we talked a lot about online fairness, and it suited us really well. But the market has evolved, the product has evolved, the company has evolved. So around 2 years ago, we really got introspective to understand what is it, what's the problem in the world that we're solving for, what's our why. And I think we did it throughout the organization, but what really rang true to a lot of people was we're operating in a world of noise, digital noise, and it's becoming harder than ever to kind of know who to trust in that. And we see Kiewit as a way in critical moments to help maintain that very hard-earned trust that brands and governments make with their consumers and constituents. And we know that we don't solve for everything around online trust, but we solve for a number of things. So we really wanted to get some meat behind the bones, or on the bones for that, and get some data behind that for what we felt to be true. I thought it was really interesting to go out and research that and see if it actually had merit. And I think the report shows overwhelmingly so that these assumptions that we had about this are true. And it is a great reason and a great why to be showing up every day here at Kiewit. And yeah, we've had a lot of fascinating finds in the data I know we'll get into. But it is this kind of trust epidemic, if you will, because with the rise of AI, with notifications, it's no longer digital first. It's digital only in some instances when you interact with either your government or how you're, as a consumer. So it's never been more important, but it's never been more fragile either. So that was why we commissioned the report. We really wanted to get some data around it to have these important conversations with our customers, but also great for our employees internally to understand the why.
And this report, we surveyed people pretty much all around the world, right? And kind of with a broad demographic. Tell us a little bit about that before we get into the report.
So we surveyed, I think it was 1,050 consumers across the globe that had, I think the criteria was that they had bought something or exchanged something online, done an online shopping experience in the last, I think, 6 months, English speaking. But yes, it was global in nature. So tried to get different aspects of ways to slice and dice the data. And we did that. And one of the findings that you'll probably ask about was definitely an interest to see the differences in the generations and how they interact or view trust, at least. So that was kind of the firmographics, if you will, that we looked at. So it's really, truly the consumer constituent, you and me. It's not companies, it's not how they view it. It's how we view it. Yeah.
Online trust, right? It can be a pretty broad, well, I guess it is a pretty broad term. Sure. Probably means different things to different people. How do you, but how do you define online trust?
So I can give you the very kind of corporate answer, of course, but when we look at it, and when I look at it, I think about what is it that makes or breaks an experience for me online, and what is it that I can probably quickly tell you what would lose my trust versus what builds my trust. And that was a lot of what we were trying to understand in this report as well. But it really, in the lens of Kiewit, comes down to reliability. If it's not there, then how can you trust it? Transparency. So obviously we interact with instances where there's a lot at stake, be it emotional anticipation of getting this ticket that you've always wanted, or a registration for a class that you need to graduate. Like, it's a make or break moment. So transparency is super important. Fairness is still very much a core value and a pillar of online trust for us. So a lot of increasingly so around personalization, right? In an AI-enabled world, we should be able to personalize the experience even more. So that's how we view it. But of course, things like security are important, and these aspects is not necessarily an area where Kiewit solves, but we're happy and excited to be part of online trust where we operate today, and the sky's the limit. It allows us a lot of innovation and growth going forward of how we could continue to solve for a growing concern.
Yeah. And I really like the fact that fairness is in there as well, right? So as you talked about, 15 years ago we were created with this big focus in fairness, and it's not that we're throwing it away from this perspective. It is still in there, but it's maybe kind of with online trust we're seeing and sharing that it's not only about that. There's other things around it that are required.
Yeah.
So I think I really liked being part of that process as well. I think it was just a really nice kind of way to get there, and really nice to see the result. Because a big part of what we do is around peak, is around high demand.
I would also quickly say that trust is just as important every day, right?
Yeah.
Peak is obviously an opportunity where emotions are running really, really high, right? But
And the likelihood,
is-
I guess,
yeah.
the likelihood of things going wrong is also higher, right? So that's hence the...
Right. But I mean, online trust is important.
Yeah.
Full stop, right? But at peak, it's so critical for a brand or government, right? Because so much is at stake for that individual. And it's, their time to shine, essentially, but also, unfortunately, a very fragile time as well, because, you can plan for everything, but you can't plan for the unexpected, and having something in place to make sure that if the worst should happen, that you have something in place to still maintain that reliability and transparency and fairness, I think is really important. So it is that emotion, I think, that triggers us as consumers to continue to trust a brand, or trust in your government is a big topic, right? That's but you have expectations, and those expectations are only growing in terms of our experiences are kind of influenced by the best brands out there, right? So I'm originally from the US. I've been living in Denmark now for 15 years, so it's not the case always. But when I am home in the US, like the Amazon on-demand, like kind of you expect things instantaneously, and they've just continued to increase that customer experience to a point where consumers then compare everything to that.
Yeah.
Like, well, if Amazon can have it here to me in 2 hours, then I'm definitely not waiting 3 days for this t-shirt kind of thing, right? So our expectations are only continuing to grow, and the best brands out there are setting the bar high, and everyone needs to follow along. And I think it puts an enormous pressure on brands and governments and organizations out there at these critical peak moments, because we know what good looks like and we're expecting it.
Maybe starting to go into some of the data points and findings in the report, and I think very related with that is around the number of bad experiences that people are, I guess, willing to accept before they start losing trust, right? I think there was some very interesting data on that.
Yeah, so it's essentially, it takes 4 great experiences to build the trust. It only takes 2 to lose it, on average. I think in some generations, some different data splits we did, it's much more, there's an even bigger contrast, right? So we've been dubbing it before we had the data that, trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets. And I think most of us can relate to that, right? Because if you review a restaurant online, you're more likely to do it when you've had a bad experience than a good experience, right? Like, you speak out more, you remember the bad experiences more. And I just don't think that there's that much wiggle room anymore. Again, back to that expectation thing, us as individuals, what we expect of brands and organizations now. So it is something that I know a lot of organizations are investing heavily in, right? So that online trust becoming the currency in which you kind of interact with your consumers online is so important, and puts a lot at stake, because it can be lost in milliseconds as well.
And you have mentioned the generation differences, and I would love to get into that a little bit. Was there anything there that surprised you?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like, okay, aging myself, old millennial, I feel pressured under this digital noise, right? Like, I think it's just getting crazier and crazier, but I had an analog childhood, right? I grew up, yes, I had computers and these kind of things, but the internet wasn't, dial up, the whole nine, right? I really thought that the newer generation, so Gen Z, would just kind of operate in it as normal. But like what the data showed was that they are even more critical of organizations, and they value trust even higher than millennials or Gen X. And that was interesting to me, because I thought somehow maybe the opposite would be true, but it didn't show that way. I mean, it was important to all generations. It just, the split between them was more was more obvious with the younger generation.
Yeah, I was kind of, I think, surprised to see that as well. One would expect it somehow it's a bit more normalized because they live in that kind of, they were born in that in that world, right? That we all live in now, but kind of being native to it, you would expect that maybe it's less impactful, but it's the other way. I think it's. I was a bit surprised, but also happy to see that it's kind of, it's good to see that it's a generation that is coming also after mine, so aging myself, but that is also demanding and expecting big things from whoever they are transacting.
Yeah, it gives me a ton of optimism, right? I think you always want the next generation to be better than you somehow, right? I have children. I want them to grow up in a better world. I'm worried I'm making a worse world for them to go fix, collectively. But I think it was a nice slice of optimism that I saw in the data as well.
I think you mentioned that the report did kind of confirmed or corroborated some of our, I guess you could say, hypotheses or views from all the experience we have with online trust. Is there any kind of data points that come to mind there? I think for me, I can think a little bit around kind of the data points that we have on the number of people that actually prefer to wait instead of going faster, but to a website that is either slow or crashing or having problems.
Yeah. I think that was, we used the opportunity, of course. We talked and tried to dig in to understand what makes and breaks trust in the survey and for the research. But while we had them anyway, we asked them a little bit more specific questions around website experiences and propensity to wait and so forth. I was very pleasantly surprised and happy to see that, they do value the experience over the speed. So I think the stat was, and I'll look it up, it's 83%, I believe, were more willing to do a short wait for a website that worked well than get immediate access to a website that was buggy, right? So that, I don't know that it was surprising, but it was definitely affirming in terms of our mission in the world, right? And equally happy to see, or I don't know about happy to see, but impressed to see that I think it was 53 minutes on average people were willing to wait for a highly coveted item. That's more than I expected. I think there's more patient people in the world than me, apparently. But I think it just underlines the importance of that peak moment where there is scarcity involved, right? And you want a fair shot at whatever that might be. You'll wait for it, right? Yeah. And it seems to resonate with all generations. So I think those were two kind of takeaways that I took. Of course, great for the brands that we work with to see that, the more they trust the business, the more they're willing to spend, the more they're willing to, get involved in loyalty programs. Maybe not rocket science, but now there is some data behind it as well that shows like trust is an important factor in building those programs and building your company's growth.
And I think adding to that, I see also the transparency component, right? That I think there's some really nice data around. For example, the 73% of consumers say that transparency is important to driving trust. I also think it. I guess you didn't ask it that way, right? But I would guess that being kind of willing to wait 53 minutes for an item, right? I think it really helps that you have the transparency in there, so that you kind of understand that your turn will come. This is how much time you should be kind of expected to.
Yeah, we call it the informed wait, right? Yeah. And there's the cue psychology. There's so many things behind that of why that's important. But I think transparency is another word alongside trust, right? It's one of the things that's built into trust as we define it, is something you hear all the time in any interaction, right? People crave transparency, and it's our human nature because it gives us a sense of security that, or maybe a sense of control. Even though you don't control, it helps you maybe accept that you're not controlling the entire situation, but feel a little element of control. And I think that's just down to human nature.
I think that reminds me, I think there was a study, I don't remember the source, but there was also kind of around waiting and informed wait. I think it was around people prefer to wait 10 minutes for a train if they know how long it's left for the train to come, than to wait 4 minutes or 3, I think it was around there, without knowing when the train is coming. So it's kind of...
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. We're back to the on-demand economy. Like, how many times have you ordered food on an app and like tracked the bike or, the driver to your door, right? It is, good or bad, it is built in us that we crave that transparency and want to know where things are. And I think, again, there must be an element in all of us that loves that sense of control. And that transparency is a big part of that. And it also shows, it just gives you that peace of mind as well. Yeah. I think the other stat was around what builds trust was equally high was the reliability, right? 74% said that a reliable website or app was one of the most important things in driving online trust for them. So that spins us back to your kind of first question to me, why is reliability so important? Well, it's the highest stat we have from the report, right? It's the license to operate. It's maybe not rocket science to think why, but reliable isn't just up or not. It's also the experience itself, and if it's buggy or if it's intermittent, that's not reliable, right? Yeah. And fairness was also definitely a data point, but I think overwhelmingly so was the reliability and transparency.
Any other thing in the report? I'm actually kind of going through because I think we've covered it quite well. I'm just...
I mean, we've covered it. We can talk a little bit about some of the stats that might matter to a business. And I think obviously this podcast is much more technical in nature, but sometimes you need to understand the why behind what you're doing. What is so important about scaling your business systems and relying on tools like Qt to help, create exceptional experiences when demand is at peak, right? It's because if consumers trust the businesses and the organizations they work with, they're willing to do more with those businesses, right? So you have job security in that your company continues to grow because your company cares about their customer experience, right? So 64% likely to be more loyal to businesses that they trust. 88%, I think for Gen Z was 90% would be willing to spend more to purchase a product from a trustworthy website versus one they don't trust, right? So those were two that... and of course, recommend, right? So if we look at the digital noise, so to speak, right? Who do you trust? You trust the people you know, right? Whether you're on LinkedIn and listening to the echo chamber there, I can ignore a lot of stuff, but I'll listen to the people that I know personally and have built relationships with. And, restaurant recommendations from a colleague go a lot further than reading a review online necessarily. So if you trust a business, 72% are more likely to recommend the business that they trust, right? So that's how you also break through the noise as an organization, I think, is relying on those experiences to kind of continue to build your brand when you're not in the room. And it all comes down to those make it or break it moments.
And I think we talked about from kind of more the technical focus, right? I think I also see this as a confirmation kind of from the end user, like the whole report, right? Confirmation from the end user that all the hard work that we do, that the technical teams around the world do, matters, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it's an extra data point on, I mean, those last percentage points that you're sweating out there for increasing the reliability of your systems, it matters around kind of the trust and how willing the end users are to interact with.
Yeah. It's alpha omega, right? It's the unsung heroes, so to speak. So on behalf of my commercial colleagues, I apologize if we are not making you feel very, very, what's the best word I could use? Cherished is probably one, but no, I think it's so important. And I mentioned it in the beginning, this kind of unspoken contract we have, and maybe it's important to start making that more vocal. Like, what is it I expect of you as a technical leader? What do I expect out of you? Because I'm sure on the technical side, it's like, oh, marketing ran this campaign again. They didn't tell us, or whatever it might be. Communication, always important. And as businesses, we think we're aligned. We think we communicate, but it's never enough, right? We can always be better. There's so much at stake, and the technical team sitting in the war rooms, so to speak, or the mission control rooms, sweating it out to make those high impact moments of success is just critical to the business, and so appreciated, even if not always explicitly mentioned.
It is now. So
You hear it here
everyone
first.
out there, not unsung heroes anymore, because now they are the sung heroes, I guess.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you for that. I think we covered the report pretty well. I was actually going through one of the things I also found interesting was around the kind of also we talked about kind of having higher expectations, higher than ever, and that the leaders out there are setting the bar that then we compare a lot of our experiences with. But I would say I was a bit surprised to see that kind of even from one of the questions was like. Did your expectations, how did they change compared to last year? And it was overwhelmingly increased, right? Around, well, I guess again, depends on the generation. I think there's quite a generation gap. Gen X saying 50% increased since last year. Gen Z 68% increased. But I mean, that's just in a year. It's
moving fast, right? No, I think, I said it, but the data is there to back it up that it's not getting any easier. And yes, scaling can be done in many different ways, and there's plenty of cloud providers out there that are, auto scaling, all of the options in the world, but you're only ever as, fast as your slowest blink, so to speak, and you can't predict everything that will happen. And I think that trying to scenario build and work together with your colleagues to understand the impact if and when things might go wrong is really important. But that if you can see it in the broader context of how much it actually means to you as a consumer, I think you can get behind whatever you need to do to make those experiences great.
Do you have any? We talk about the tech teams and the tech leads, and is there kind of with what we have discussed and with kind of with the report in mind, maybe your experience as well? Is there any kind of key takeaways for them? Is there anything that if there's like a one or two, if there's anything you want to take away from this discussion from the report, what should it be? I mean, we talked about that what technical teams do is important.
Yeah.
But is there?
Yeah, I mean, of course, full stop, what you do matters, right? Absolutely. I think I don't know if that's a takeaway from the report, but please do communicate with your commercial teams. We're not that scary, I promise. We want to make a mutual success together when we're, building big campaigns, whatever it might be. But just operating as a business kind of takes all hands, and the more open communication lines and expectation setting we have up front, the more smoothly things will run in general. And I know, again, as marketing, we come with, we've read this latest thing we want to test and we want to put it on the website. And we know it still needs to not break the website, right? It needs to make everything run fast, but does it perform at peak? I don't know that as a marketer. I really think about that. I think about, I'll run it through the lighthouse test on Google, boom, fine, right? But what does it mean when the site's actually under pressure? And it's not everyone that thinks that way, I think. So we can be better as marketers as well, for sure. But yes, what you do matters for the business, but what you do matters for the world, right? And I love that about working at Qt. It's like I'm showing up to do something that really matters, that it's, my niece's ability to register for that last class in her senior year to, graduate, or it's, someone close to me who wants to run the half marathon, or me that gets the ticket, right? It's these really critical moments in a lifetime. Like, it's actually super personal in some ways that, Qt is kind of there helping. Not everyone goes to Disney World every day, but if, they're, using our systems to create experiences for that individual on any given day. I mean, Disney is a big thing for some people. It's a once in a lifetime thing, right? Or my daughter wants to go to a Taylor Swift concert, right? Like, it's not something that is necessarily every day, but it is so emotionally important where we touch the user experience.
Before we wrap up, are you up for some rapid fire questions?
Oh, geez. Sure.
Just maybe 3 or 4.
Okay.
But it's rapid, so it won't.
Okay,
it shouldn't
so I have
take
to give
too
an
long.
answer real fast?
Yes, and well, you can
What are
take
the
some
rules?
time, but the rules is kind of ideally you don't overthink it.
Okay.
Just share what comes to mind first.
I overthink by nature, so let's go.
But now you have an excuse not to do it. To you, scalability is
Important.
Important. Very good. Is there any book, podcast, thought leader that you would recommend?
I love this guy, Anthony Perry, on LinkedIn. He talks a lot about product marketing and positioning, but that's just me.
Okay, so would that be a good person for our kind of our technical audience to listen to as well, to kind of get a little bit of a
if you're building, if you're working on infrastructure and stuff, it's maybe one thing, but if you're building products, absolutely. I think you want to build products that make a difference, right? And he's speaking a lot about how to educate your market on the difference that it makes, right?
Last question. Do you have any advice? Knowing you, I'm sure you do. But do you have any advice that you would give to your younger self? Or maybe to someone starting right now, maybe in marketing, maybe in kind of a SaaS startup world?
Yeah, I think remain curious. If you're young in your career, just say yes. I've later in my career have to learn how to say no. But when you're early in your career and you don't have kids and you don't have commitments, just say yes, learn, figure out what you like, what you don't like, what excites you, what energizes you, what depletes your energy, because you have a lifetime ahead of you of work. So you might as well enjoy it. And then you learn how to say no.
I think with that word of advice, I think we can wrap it up.
No.
There you go. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And that's it for this episode of the Smooth Scaling Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing and perhaps share it with a friend or colleague. If you want to share any thoughts or comments with us, send them to smoothscaling@kiwit.com. This podcast is researched by Joseph Thwaites, produced by Perseu Mandillo, and brought to you by Kiwit, your virtual waiting room partner. I'm your host, José Quaresma. Until next time, keep it smooth, keep it scalable.